regular meeting of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. I guess we need a roll call.
Mayor Really? Chairman Camacho.
Yep, I'm here.
Mr. Feigenbaum. Oh, this is an old list.
Yeah.
Mr. Frere. Mr. Dellaret.
He's on mute. I'm here, Troy.
He's here.
Okay. Mr. Kasimis.
Here.
Ms. Brown.
Here.
Who am I missing? I lost an old list.
Ed Abrams is here.
There you go, Ed, thank you. You have a quorum.
Okay. First item on the agenda is the approval of the May 4 regular meeting minutes that were attached to the agenda. Everyone's had a chance to review them. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Okay, Ed, move to approve. Any discussion, any changes? Any deletions, additions?
Ed, can you hear me, Ed?
Yeah,
Troy.
Yeah.
On page 5, it's just a minor, on the second paragraph, Bloom Shapiro was unanimously chosen. It says chose, so as the order.
Okay. Okay, is there anything else? No other changes? Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes of the May 4th, 2020 meeting as amended, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions? The motion carries. The minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda, special appropriations. There are none. Section B, transfer agenda, is the next item. And there appear to be transfers from police, fire, finance, operations, and education. Angela, would you care to speak on those, or the mayor? Or Henry, I'm sorry, you're right in front of me. I didn't see you.
Thank you, Ed. I think Angela is the expert.
Okay. Angela, you're on mute.
It's not saying that I'm on mute on my machine.
Okay, you're good now. You're good now.
Okay. I'll share my screen. Or maybe it won't allow me. Can you see my screen?
If everyone has the agenda, we have section.
Oh, okay.
Section B.
Okay. The first transfer for the finance department. The first department is purchasing, and that is for the additional lines for teleconferencing with Meeting Bridge. The second is the IT department, and that is all overtime due to COVID. And within the purchasing department, there was ample salary surplus. So, and there will still be surplus even after this roughly $25,000 transfer. Next, for the police last year, they had some policemen out on leave. So they had surplus in their overtime budget because they were accommodating that leave. So I took that surplus to put it into other areas where they're seeing a higher than normal overtime expenditures that weren't related to COVID. And also the third item on the list I don't know if you remember, they discussed in their operating budget review for fiscal year on 2021, they've had a higher number than usual police officers that are enrolling in higher education programs. So this is to cover the deficit in that account. And the last one is the overtime expenditures year to date for related to COVID services. Do you want me to just keep going? Do you want any discussion per item?
Well, I think we're going to, because they're over an aggregate of $5,000. I think we have to vote on each item. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Okay. So given that they're, well, unless there is an objection, maybe you can go through all of them and then we can ask questions as we go.
Okay.
There's no objection? Okay.
Okay. For the fire department, both of their transfers are for the related overtime for COVID expenditures and a small amount for cleaning supplies. The operations and public works, they had the largest, other than the Board of Education, amount of COVID related expenditures for, and I did find, I talked to Anthony Carr and he is always so accommodating when I'm looking for budget dollars. There was a surplus in their temporary wages that they won't be using because of COVID. So I was able to use some of that surplus, but they don't have much surplus in any other areas. So I did take that out of contingency, the bulk of their COVID related expenditures. And for education, that is for the cleaning of all of the school buildings. That does not include the COVID related laptops that were transferred into that special capital appropriation that at the previous meeting that was approved for the Board of Education. So that's only for the cleaning. And at the bottom, I thought you might want to see a summary. It's at the end of the agenda, I do a summary of what's left, but I thought you might like to see here before you vote that we still have almost $45,000 left in contingency. And I don't see any additional costs out of contingency at this point. We're pretty close to year end.
So I have a question about the fire department, the 108. What was that? That's the biggest of the two. 103, sorry. COVID related. What was that expense again?
The fire had a lot more overtime related expenditures for COVID than the police department. I think they had a lot of emergency calls related to COVID. So and also they had firefighters that were out because of COVID. They were either ill or they were quarantined.
Okay.
Yeah, when they had to, when they had to quarantine one firefighter, all the firefighters on that shift also had to be quarantined. So they had to hire a whole shift, I believe, for several days, and that increased their overtime. And again, Mr. Dakowitz and Angela can verify that we are logging these in as COVID-related expenses with the hopes of having some reimbursement.
Okay.
Hey,
Yes.
Angela, don't you, since we're still in a pandemic and the year hasn't ended yet, don't you expect more expenses in COVID?
I don't expect any cleaning supplies. Maybe there will be some more overtime, but it's also slowing. So my conversations with departments, I don't see that much coming in related to me.
Artie, the year is also over when July,
July,
June
yeah.
30.
the fiscal year. So it's like a month to go.
Fiscal year is June 30, although commitments or invoices that come within 60 days of year end are also included in this year. So we're sort of okay where we are now. It wouldn't surprise me if we end up having more and it goes through contingency, and maybe that affects our rainy day fund if we needed to. But then again, at year end, we may have cost savings because of certain other items going on that we didn't have. So it's kind of okay for now. Let's see what happens. We don't think there'll be material significant things coming down the pike that we can't pay for.
Okay.
Okay. And that's all the items, transfer items?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other questions in connection? Well, I don't think there was a motion in connection with these.
No, I had a question along those same lines of a surplus. On the fire department, it says here that the current wage surplus totals $1,500,000 with an expected year-end balance to be about 500,000. Is that truly what I'm reading there, that we could have a?
Yes, that during budget season, there are vacancies. There are quite a few in police and fire, so they have the bulk of the surplus at year end, and that is what offsets a lot of the deficits in the other accounts. So even if the contingency is used up with COVID expenses, there's usually a large surplus in regular wages.
So that also begs another question: is that where was that $1,500,000 surplus that I assume you've already used some of that up, but how can we have $1,500,000? I thought.
That won't be the total surplus. I estimated that it may be 500,000, and that's due to vacancies.
And those are unexpected vacancies they have?
Yes.
They may have had, they may have had vacancies, let's say during the year, they only filled some of those positions, or the positions were filled and then it became vacant during the year. So what tends to happen is we don't spend all of the budgeted money in personnel. And it's a mix, it depends, but just we have saves of partial years for certain positions in each department because of the large number of people on staff in fire and other departments. We almost know we can count on it. So we budgeted certain amount in contingency. We have some other saves. There are also certain expenses that go above our budgeted numbers. So right now we think we're kind of okay for the year, and we'll see as we finalize the numbers in a month.
Are we looking at the same kind of numbers in the police department?
I haven't looked at the police surplus specifically, but they're usually around the same, but it's usually offset by other deficits in other areas.
So bottom line is that our contingency is probably closer to $1,000,000 than 45,000.
We're talking from a budgetary point of view where each line item stands on its own. But if you want to say, do we have sources of funding that could accommodate us for unexpected expenses in certain areas? Yes. I'm just going to be precise because I don't want someone to point to that contingency line.
Okay, well said.
Don't ask me to say it again.
Yeah, I know, you never would get it in a million years.
Sometimes the vacancies are offset by things like severance, and those numbers can be large sometimes if someone retires or leaves the city and they're owed for their unused sick time or their unused vacation time. So those are other unknowns that offset the unknown of vacancies.
A good example was the assessor and deputy assessor who left, and they left early in the year. The assessor was replaced in January 15th, and we are now interviewing for deputy assessors. We had significant amounts of severance and accrued time that they were owed. So even if we didn't fill the position for months, we may have a financial obligation there.
Now, I understand that, and the only reason I just thought a little surprising that the fire department and then really in the police department that it would be that significant of a number. What about the Board of Education? How are we running with them as far as how you expect them to come out at the end of the year? Angela, do you want to talk about that? You've looked at that.
Right. Yeah, it seems like they will have a pretty significant surplus this year. I never know until the end of the year. And they do have that 90 days that expenses can still come in after July 1st. So as far as I can tell now, it looks like they will have a significant surplus, definitely at least their 1% rollover.
1% of 200 and X number thousand
I believe you said at least, at least.
1.98 million from the $198.5 million that were budgeted this year. So if they request it, we are required to give them 1% as a rollover. But
I'm not sure that we're, I'm not sure that we're required to, Henry. I think we can.
right, excuse me, they can request, and depending upon if approved, that could be given to them. But we do know that they have had additional COVID expenditures. We've had some of those items which were approved by the council. There have been ongoing discussions. And of course, there's reimbursement that should be coming. So it's still, it's not definite yet. But again, right now, from where we sit, where we've looked at 10, maybe 11 months worth of data, depending upon what line items, we think we're okay for this year.
It sounds like we are very okay for this year.
We tend to be conservative. We'll just say, okay.
Are there any other questions? Any other questions? Is there a motion to approve the transfers as presented?
So moved.
Make a motion.
It's been moved by Mr. Gilloret and Mr. Frere. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. The transfer items are approved. Next on the agenda is Oak Hills coming up, or let's see, sorry, I have to go back up to the top.
Oak Hills.
Oak Hills, okay. Oak Hills presentation. Mr. Gartner, Mr. Dickens are on, I believe.
We are.
Okay. You would like to walk us through your presentation, your budget for 2021, as well as what's been going on this year?
I wasn't aware that we were doing a presentation, so I do not have one.
Okay.
But we can tell you what's been going on.
Okay, that's fair enough.
And we can tell you where we're at and how it's looking for the rest of this year, if that works with everybody. Let me adjust the camera a little bit there. And Mark is on where if we need to talk about some numbers and that sort of thing. We reopened the golf course on May 8th. And I believe at that particular time, we had somewhere in the neighborhood of about $1,600 in our bank account. Through the opening and now at the end of this month, the golf course has been extremely busy, where tee times are booked almost solid every day, and they're extremely booked on the weekends. So while we have a lot of a debt that we're still working down against, because when we reopened, we had somewhere around the neighborhood of about $400,000 of debt that we had to service, including $20,000 that we needed to get paid right away to get our certificate of insurance so that we could be open as a business. We were able to accomplish that. We were able to put together a limited staff in the very beginning, as well as a COVID schedule as well for safety for our own staff members, as well as for our patrons. As it stands right now, we've been able to pay off some bills that we needed to pay. And I think after this past, we had almost a little over a $40,000 weekend this weekend. And by the time that we got all of the credit card money and other money that came through over the weekend that settled into the account, we're now in the neighborhood of upwards of $200,000 that we have. Now, while that's a great sum of money and we're very happy and delightful that we can do that, it doesn't mean we're anywhere out of the woods yet, but we're working hard on it because we still are paying down, if you recall, that $400,000. Including in that $400,000 is a $200,000 line of credit that we had to draw against in order to keep going when we weren't open and had no money coming in. And that line of credit has to be paid off by, I believe it is October, and then it has to set basically idle for 30 days for us to be eligible to have a line of credit in that same amount for the 2020 year starting in January. Uh,
2021.
I'm sorry, that's right, thank you, for 2021. So that's the basic state of where we are right now. We're also, in case you haven't heard, the members have heard and some other folks have, we're also now in the process of putting together an advertisement to be looking for a pro. The pro that's been there for the past 8 years, Ed Rees, who's done a very good job, turned in his resignation last Thursday. He, according to him and his words, has landed his dream job. He's taking a position as director of golf at a course just outside Annapolis, Maryland, the Eisenhower Golf Course, which has been closed. It's run by the Billy Casper Group, who runs food and beverage and golf courses around the country, maybe around the world. They've been closed for a number of years with a major renovation. They're ready to open the golf course back up, and then they'll be opening their food and beverage back up also. So Ed was one of 85 people that they looked at for that position, and he landed. So we're now in the position of looking for, we need, Ed has been our general manager and pro. We're looking at going back to where we were roughly 10 years ago, of having a director of operations or a manager, and then also a pro. So we've started that process. We've reached out to the CSGA. We're reaching out to the MetGA, PGA, and a number of other golf courses and some other contacts that we have to start posting for the pro position first. We have a couple of people on staff that has been working in the pro shop for checking people in and the cashier, who know the system. So we're very fortunate there that can keep us up and running. We shouldn't lose anything there, and particularly not lose any revenue or lose any bookings and that sort of thing. As far as the rest of the year goes, barring any unforeseen problems, we'll just keep working the way we are now, and the play has been high. We've been able to start to expand the hours. We started out 9 to 5. We're now working, the course I believe is now open from 8 to 7. We also were able to start putting riding carts back out. Following COVID standards, though, there's only one rider per cart. But that's good, because that's an extra $18 per cart that goes out. So now instead of 2, there's 4. So we're still working hard to make the best of this year that we possibly can as a small business. The downside is that we had a remarkable beginning on outings. And we had booked probably in excess of 150, 60 some $1,000s in outings. And we've lost most of those with people that, they just decided they're not having a golf outing this year, and that's understandable. Some of them have said, just hang on to the deposit money, let it roll over into next year because we'll be back, and that's good. But that's been an issue, of course. Other than that, that's kind of where we're at right now. That's the kind of the state of the state.
I had a quick question for you.
Sure.
I believe you sold this year at the beginning, you sold, I'm not sure if you call them season tickets, basically tickets so that people can golf the whole year.
Yes. When we that was on that's always been on the agenda, but we ramped that up when we needed to reopen because we needed some cash. So we made a big effort to make season passes, both limited and unlimited, as well for residents and non-residents, and also family memberships. That worked very well for us because that brought in very quickly almost $90,000.
Mhm.
And we have a limit on those where there is only 25 of those available to non-residents, 75 to residents, because what would happen very quickly is that if you get a lot of people playing unlimited golf with season passes, we're going to eat up our inventory for regular play. And we're getting close to that now, but there is a cap on that.
All right. That was my question, what the impact was going to be down the road with these unlimited passes, if that was going to eat into your revenue stream down the road at some point.
Correct. And it would. So that's why we've limited the number, both resident and non-resident.
Okay.
And we've had a lot, I think over the weekend, we sold 2 or 3 of the family passes, and the family passes are around $2,500. If I, Mark, I know you're on. If I misstate a number, please jump in.
Yep.
But people have been people have responded to it. It's a model that we have wanted to play with for some time, but we're afraid to play with. And COVID forced us into it. So it's something that we
If
want to
I
take
might,
to heart.
1 minute, please.
Sure.
At 7 o'clock tonight, I called for a moment of silence, and it is now 7 p.m. 1 minute of silence for all the Norwalk residents and others who have lost their lives through the COVID-19. And while we're at it, please, a moment of silence in remembrance of George Floyd, who died in the hands of the Minneapolis Police Department. Thank you. We will be holding a much larger memorial service at some point in the future. But I wanted to just have this moment of silence. This has been a very challenging time for the city of Norwalk, the state of Connecticut, indeed the entire country, on a wide variety of issues. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think where I left off is I said this is a model that we're looking at for future as we get ready to go into next year, into 2021 in January through February particularly, and into March, of seeing if we can bring this back and ramp this up and generate some revenue in the off season, so to speak, when we don't have players on the course, that we can get some money stashed away so that we've got a little cushion here or there and not rely on our line of credit that we sometimes have to rely on every year, and other things that might come up. So
I'm not sure if you talked about this, I may have missed it, but what's going on with the restaurant, and what's the interplay with
so that's a good question. So right now the restaurant's closed because we weren't able to open that up at all and meet any kind of COVID standards. There is a possibility we could still take a look at that down the road. One of the things that we staunchly agreed to when we opened, we didn't want people gathering around, either up on the porch or outside the restaurant or in the parking lot and those sort of things. We have opened the halfway house. That actually opened, it was either on May 15th or within the week right after that. So that is open. But we've been looking at also if we could or could not open the restaurant up right now, to even for people as they're perhaps getting ready to leave the course, they want to have takeaway or something along those lines. But right now that's kind of on the side.
Mr. Dickens, they're not going to open for the outside dining at all?
We can take a look at that, Mr. Mayor. I mean, we could set up something on the outside, even in the parking lot. My biggest concern is we'd have to expand it out, I think, that way, and limit the menu, I think, as well. And those are conversations that we've had. But I really don't want to have, at least yet, from our point of view, of a large gathering out on the porch, because we're still checking people in on the porch down by the pro shop. So and everybody's required to still have a face mask on until you get to the first tee and start playing, and then you can take your mask off. But right now we've not had anybody in the pro shop. We put plexiglass up there where you swipe your card on the outside, the ticket is printed out, your receipt on the outside. The gentleman that's up on the porch says, oh yeah, you got a tee time, and lets you go get your ticket. So it could become very congested up there. We just want to avoid that, but we're looking at all of that.
What is the, if you don't mind, Mr. Camacho, Mr. Dickens, what is the time between tee-offs now? Are we still at 12 minutes or did we shorten it?
It started out at 12 and now we're at 10.
Okay. And that's proven to be enough of a time lapse so that there's no backing up on the par threes?
Right. Yeah, no, it's been fine. I played last Tuesday and it was a little slower than normal, but that's because we had 2 guys riding and 2 guys walking. So, you know, that kind of was a little adjustment, which happens all the time anyway, but it's still, but no, the pace of play, we've not had any complaints about it at all. The course is in good shape. Greens are in good shape because there's 2 different kinds of grasses on the green. One is darker and one's lighter. And because it's set dormant for a while, it's in great shape. Jim's done a good job of keeping everything looking pretty pristine. Some people have said they thought we had a disease on the greens. We had no problem with the greens. It's because the bent tree grass and the, what's the other one? Starts with a P, paloma grass. Those 2 things.
Ed, this is Troy. I have some questions for Carl. First of all, I have to say, Carl, the course is in great shape. I've been playing there a lot. I did get the unlimited plan. I was very happy about that.
Good.
The course is in great shape. Couple of questions. When I did hear about Ed, I heard it on Saturday. I did speak with him. I was very disappointed to hear that. I think Ed's been there 9 years. He's done a great job.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if that was a surprise to you, and was there any way we maybe was trying to keep him, at least for this year, and put off what he was trying to do?
So it didn't come as a big surprise because I knew he was been talking to the Casper people for some time. And I know he was looking at that. I know that wasn't his preference. We did talk about any kind of a counter. We talked about that, I think it was Saturday we did, or Friday. And right now we don't have the kind of money that we could counter because he's got a very good deal he's going to right now.
Okay, like I said, I was very disappointed, especially this year with the transition of the course with the COVID. That was kind of disappointing. The other thing is a couple of things. The unlimited, how does the unlimited, first of all, you have 75 residents and 25 out. What's the numbers of the sales for the residents? I heard it was about 45. Is that right?
Mark would know that better than I, but the limit is 25 for non-residents and 75 for residents.
Yeah, but how many were sold out of the 75 and how many were sold out of the 25 pools?
Mark, do we have that number? No, we looked at it a week ago.
It's changing every day. We're getting close to the limits, but I don't have the exact number as of today because we sold a bunch more over the weekend.
So you're saying you're close to 75 for the residents now?
I think so, yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
I think on Friday it was about 61 or 62.
I think it was in the 60s on Friday, but we can get you that number and break it
Yeah,
out.
sure, that'd be great. And for the out of town, as you're saying, that's pretty much maxed out also?
Again, we're getting up to those numbers. I don't have that, right on me right now, but on Friday we looked at it and it was getting close.
Yeah, and it probably is getting close, Troy, because right out of the box, the first big rush of people that bought the passes were non-residents.
Okay. Yeah, no, I was one of them, but we were very happy. We've been asking for that for a long time. Carl, I was at one of your meetings and we were looking for that. I was very happy to see that.
Yep.
The other thing is, how does all this play into the loan repayment? Obviously, that was supposed to start this year. You didn't speak about that. How's that working?
Well, obviously, if we could delay that, that would be a big help to us because whatever it turned out to be, it would be in savings. But I mean, we're prepared to try to fulfill our commitment with the revenue that we generate from July 1 now to the rest of the year and beyond to pay that $2 per revenue round back. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you've thought about this, but how are you going to handle the unlimited players play for each of the $2 each round?
Well, keep in mind that it says $2 per revenue round, so they're already paid in advance. So that's something we'd have to take a look at.
And the other thing,
I'm sorry, Troy, unless they go over the.
Sorry, Ed, you broke up there.
Sorry, go on, Troy. Go on. I'm sorry.
the other thing is on the carts, Carl. You said earlier that now that there's two you have to take out 4 carts for 4 people. It's still the same amount of money because if there's 2 people in a cart, they each pay $18. So
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true.
Additional revenue there.
Right.
And
Well, the additional revenue I meant to say came when we allowed the carts to go out, because prior to that, it was the pull carts. So.
But you said it was double the amount for 2 people. In
Yeah,
a
no,
cart.
it's not. It's still 18 per player.
Right. That's right. And the other thing about the restaurant, Ed makes a good point, but I'm wondering why they're not trying to do either like all the other restaurants in town, the outdoor dining and also pickup if you order and you could take out. So
some of that had to do with, and we've had these conversations. We have a Babar who just joined our group, is now the restaurant guy that we talked to. It's been talking to Joe and his team. And a big part of that early on was just simply the financial capability of GMG, which is Joe's corporation, to actually open the restaurant up. So it's something that we still are talking about and seeing where it might head to and how we could do it.
So Carl, this is Jim Freyer. I just had a quick question. You alluded to the fact that you may change the structure a little bit now that it's leaving back to what it was 10 years ago. I can barely remember 2 weeks ago. Could you refresh me on what kind of structure you're talking about for management of the course?
Sure. There used to be and some of you may remember Shelley, which was long before my time, but I've gotten caught up on all this through research. There was an executive director, which was Shelley, and actually it wasn't even a full-time executive director, it was a part-time director. And then there was a pro, that was Ed. Or prior to that, I'm sorry, that was back to the Gorillas when they were here, when Vinny was here and the family. And then there was a part-time bookkeeper that took care of the money and things that now Mark does plus more. So that was the structure that ran the course at the time. What we're taking a look at is to see if we can do something similar to the same thing. Wouldn't involve Mark because Mark's in his position, but where we have a person that is a director of golf or general manager with very specific responsibilities for the execution of the course from the business standpoint and marketing and sales and everything that was laid out in the reorg plan of 2017, and then allow the pro to come on board and the pro take care of what the pro's responsibilities are, which is really take care of the patrons and also oversee the instruction and the teaching. I mean, we have Paul is there, but whether or not the new pro would want to be that or not. So it's just trying to see if the pieces can be put together to be run more efficiently and not have all of the burden of running the golf course and everything on one person, which has pretty much been on Ed's shoulders since that plan was put together.
Any other questions? We have one more item on the agenda, so we can sort of wrap
Yeah,
this.
Carl, real quick, I have one more. Just tell us about the tennis and what that arrangement is with the tennis and why it's being outsourced and why we can't do that in-house.
Well, we looked very hard at bringing the tennis in-house last year, and again this year. We're very close to it before COVID hit. It is less expensive for us to run it the way it is now by licensing Kings Highway to do it than to go hire pros and to take care of it internally. But it is something that's been discussed and we still are taking a hard look at. We've also not had, and I've just submitted today, I think it was this afternoon, a name for a person to join the board that really knows tennis. We've been working with Art and some other people. We haven't had a member on the board for some time that's really a tennis person. So we need that. And of course, that also needs to be gone out to publicize more that we actually have tennis courts there. So Kings Highway has been the licensee of the courts. And with that, one of the big things they bring in is not only a lot of players that they have to play inside in the wintertime, but they run all the leagues also. Now, we've had conversation with Nick about getting the grassroots tennis organization involved also with us so we could spread the word on the tennis operation. and start growing that and really start to grow that as a revenue center as well as we do with the other things. But it is part of the future of the plans of the park itself.
Carl, hi, this is Sherry Brown. I'm just wondering, you talked about you have a lot of people who are from out of town. What towns do they normally come from? Can you
Mostly right around here, you know, either from Darien or Weston or New Canaan and close by. I mean, you know, right over the city limits areas. There are some that drive further. They come from 30, 40, 50 miles away. At the end of last year, we had probably close to 56%, maybe a little bit above that, that actually made up the players of the course, which is good for us because for number one, they pay a higher rate when they play, and they also spread the word. But one of the reasons we get that is because the facility is so good compared to where they live with their own facilities, which is you know, an effort that we've been doing a lot on, and we're looking at on, and we've had conversations with the mayor and Nick again on this and other people on how we better market the facility that we have, particularly to our folks that currently live here. But one of the things we're doing as a reach out program is trying to get a program together where when people move to the city, and from what I hear from my real estate friends, there's a lot of people starting to move in, which is good. Both apartment wise and also with buying homes here, is to reach more out to them. Some of you may or may not remember some of the old welcome wagon programs that used to be in cities. We'd love to get something started like that here in Norwalk that is even bigger than Oak Hills, that when somebody moves in, they get a welcoming packet of things from all of the great things that we have to offer in the city, telling people about what we have as amenities. And Oak Hills, of course, would be part of that. So that if you are a new person and you show that and you get this card, maybe you could come and get a free round of golf or something like that. Because still the best form of advertising for golf courses is word of mouth.
I'll just jump in real quick and say that I heard last week we had a foursome from the far end of Long Island that drove all the way up here.
There you go.
Part of that was because the limited amount of golf that they can do right now, but that was impressive.
Yep.
Cool. Anything else? No other questions? Thank you guys for your.
Thank you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You know, and don't be strangers. You can always send me emails when you got questions and things so that we can, you know, one of the things we've strived for the last year since we've been the chairperson is reaching out and communicating with the city and everybody else to know what's really going on in Oak Hills. The mayor and Alicia have been fantastic, and the mayor was such a big help during the early days of this, not only in his support, but in keeping my spirits up as well. So I appreciate that very, very much. But communication is the real key. So let me know anytime.
Thank you, Mr. Dickens, and Mr. Gartner as well.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the status of the contingency account, financial reports. Henry or Angela, would either of you like to help us with that?
There's also the approval of the operating budget and associated tax rates under other business.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I see it. So shall we start with the status of the contingency account? I guess we sort of talked about that, didn't we, a bit earlier?
Are we doing the budget first or the contingency accounts?
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Approval of the fiscal year 2021 operating budget. Yeah, sorry about that.
Right. So do we want to review the budget numbers one last time for the season?
I just wanted to comment on one change. The planning and zoning department, they wanted to give me an accurate number. They had one employee that the salary was higher by $3,388. It was a small change, so I reduced that salary budget, but I increased the contingency, so we have an extra $3,388 in contingency. So there were no other changes. The total expenditure stays the same. It doesn't affect the mill rates or any of the other levy information.
Is that satisfactory, or do we want to go through the numbers specifically? It's up to you guys.
I
Well, we've
say
been
we
through these
just
numbers
vote. We don't
before.
need to hear the numbers again. We should all know them.
Yeah, I see these numbers in my sleep.
Okay. I'd rather not, so.
Okay, so as presented previously, thank you.
Yeah. If that's the only change, I'm okay with it, Ed.
Yeah, okay. All right, so we don't need to, that's not an action item on our part, is it? We don't need to vote because that's already been
I
approved.
thought it's a formal vote that approves the mill rates.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yes. Yeah, it is a formal approval to approve the mill rates. Final.
Didn't we do
Because
that
the
last
only
meeting?
Yeah, I thought we did that already, but
no, the last meeting was approving the tentative approved budget, and this is the final approval of the budget.
Final.
okay, so before we do the final, would you like to give us like a you know, a 30-second overview?
Let me just jump to the numbers again.
Do you have to move it, Ed, first? So you have to move.
Yeah, let's move the item. Would you like to move it, Troy?
So moved.
Okay.
So as we show on the first page of the budget, we're showing an increase of 4.9% in our expenditures. The Board of Ed is 5%. I guess everything else will probably be in the 4.8%, 4.7% for a total expenditure increase of 4.9%. Then we had below the line on the page, the second page, we have the below the line adjustments. I've called them the tax adjustments, reserve for uncollected. We have the other tax revenue, and then the non-tax revenue. The fund transfer remains at $8 million. The planned transfer for next year, which is $2 million more than the current year. The net tax levy went up by 6%. The grand list went up by 2.92%. So the average mill rate for next year is going up by 2.975%. The third page shows the detail by each taxing district. And we're looking at the increases in the tax bills, $162 in the first district, $602 in the sixth, and we're looking at a range of 2.75% to 3.68% for the individual mill rate increases.
Okay.
Mr. Camacho, I
yes,
just want to
Mayor.
make a couple of comments if I could. As you can well imagine, this was a very, very challenging year for a lot of reasons. Certainly trying to do what we can to fund our Board of Education and work with them, try to reconcile some of their current year's budget with what's going to be happening next year. But with all the things going on with the coronavirus and different issues that we're having as far as taxes being, tax collection being delayed until October 1st, other expenses that we're trying to, again, wrap our arms around. I want to really commend the department heads for coming in with budgets that I think are reasonable and considerate of what we're going through now. But I know that Henry and Angela really, really worked extremely hard with going through the budget with a fine-tooth comb, making sure that the only requests that we considered were requests that were absolutely critical. We ended up turning down a tremendous number of increased position requests because we didn't feel this was the right time to do it. And we wanted to make sure that we're not taxing people out of the city of Norwalk, for lack of a better term. One of the things Mr. Dickens mentioned, and I can verify this, we are seeing people that are considering moving into Norwalk and Fairfield County because of the coronavirus and because of the things they experienced in New York or Westchester or surrounding areas. This is a very challenging year. I think we put together a budget that is treating our community fairly, while still trying to provide as many services as we possibly can. And I've always said that the budget process is not a static process. It's fluid, it's dynamic. Decisions can be brought before this board over the next year to make whatever changes we feel is appropriate. But again, I want to thank Angela and Henry for the hard work that they put into this. And I want to thank the Board of Estimate and Taxation. Your challenge is a difficult one at times, and it's never a good thing when we have to levy taxes. But unfortunately, in a state like Connecticut that relies so heavily on property taxes, we don't have much choice. But we are able to maintain, we believe very firmly that we're going to be able to maintain our AAA bond rating, which is so important to the future of our community. So again, that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's been a motion to approve the mill rate. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye. In favor.
Abstentions? The motion carries unanimously. The mill rates are approved.
Thank you, everybody.
I would just let everyone know, the tax collector and the tax assessor have already been coordinating on these assumptions. We're looking to get those into the mail within the next 2 weeks, which is the same time every year, even though all of the committee meetings were deferred by a month. That way, especially those institutions that are required to pay in the 30-day grace period by August 1st will do so. So it's coordinated well, and we thank you for your approval and support.
I do want to add one more thing. Today at our cabinet meeting, Mr. Dakowitz mentioned that all the Board of Assessment Appeals issues were now handled. I've asked for a complete report on the impact on our operating budget and our grant list, and where we stand with that. And I will make sure that once we get that report and take a look at it and answer any questions and tweak it to the degree necessary, that we will get it out to each and every one of you as well.
That's good news.
Ed, while we're on the subject, can I ask Henry a quick question? Henry, a few weeks ago, you had concerns about the capital budget and, you know, all the items that we have approved, and if they all come due, the timing. Can you just talk a little about that quickly?
Yeah, in summary, Troy, I think because during the mayor's tenure for 6 years, budgets were conservative. We built up some surpluses. We built up a rainy day fund. We maintained a AAA bond rating, and we just managed conservatively. Because of that, we have been unique in being able to handle COVID compared to most other localities. We're not out of the woods. There are going to be some revenue shortfalls. There'll be some additional expenses, but we've been able to weather the storm better than almost any community that I've heard of, okay? Having said all of that, I'm the early warning system. So going to the future, we knew even before COVID, we were going to have some pressures. We're drawing down $8 million of fund balance this year. We anticipated next year that we would not. The pension fund assets took a hit as the market went down. So our contributions going forward will have to increase. We have debt as we borrow more, which is part of the plan to invest in the schools. We have more debt, the debt service will go up. So we know we're going to have pressures. The capital expenditure is the same sort of thing. It's an ambitious program. And I'm just saying the recession that we knew was going to come one day came in a month. So now is the time. So I think we're okay for now, but as we go forward with both operating and capital budgets, we have to be very judicious. We have to be very cautious. I thought the mayor was very disciplined this year, and I expect even more discipline in the future. Whether it's adding to people, whether it's expenses by department, whether it's how much the Board of Ed gets, we have to do that on all dimensions. If we do so, we can navigate. Now, specifically on the capital expenditures, as I said, I inherited a whole bunch of authorized projects for which we did not bond yet. So we have those. We have the long list of capital budget items we passed this year. We only have so much capital budget capacity to borrow. So either we slim down or reduce some of the old projects, or we extend it out. Instead of doing it in the next 2 to 4 years, maybe we extend some of the projects longer, or we give up a AAA bond rating. There are only so many ways we can extend that. The best that I could do is I can borrow at record low interest rates. So that helps. But assuming we're going to be borrowing because we have so many ambitious projects, we have to make some tough decisions about priorities. I still think we're positioned very well. I'm just saying there's going to be difficult decision-making going forward. That's all. And as the mayor always reminds me, we make the best decisions as of today. As the environment changes, as we have more knowledge, we make better decisions. And that's all we can do collaboratively. You good folks at the Board of Estimate, the Common Council, the Finance Committee, the Board of Ed and their Finance Committee. We're in it together. Our objectives are all the same. The question is how to do it prudently and judiciously, especially, as the mayor has said, being sensitive to this terrible recession that's out there that's affecting all of our citizens and taxpayers. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you for the update. Yes.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I believe the item has been approved. So thank you all for that. Next item is the, go back up to the agenda. Okay, additional information, financial reports, year-end capital budget report, etc. Would you like to just go through those?
Angela, would you like to dig in?
We already went through the status of contingency. The way it's presented here is before the approval of any additional contingencies. You can see that the balance is $461,149. The new transfers from contingency is $416,000. So the balance will roughly be about $45,000. The rest of the reports on the operating budget, you can see a lot of surpluses and expenditures. I don't expect that the surpluses will not be able to cover any deficits in any of the accounts. It's usually just unknown balance between the two, and I haven't seen any deficits that are alarming. You may have seen there were some deficits you may have seen on the salary reports at the end. There was one large deficit for the police department, and the police department during the year, they do a lot of movement between the departments, and it was all related to moving to other between departments. There's no real deficits in the salary accounts that don't have offsetting surpluses in other departments. On the revenue side, there may be, some items that don't come in that were budgeted. I don't know if Henry, do you want to talk on the revenue side?
Yeah, I'll talk about both sides. Thank you. So what we've instituted, part of it is probably just year end, and part of it is due to COVID. Wanted to take a very close look at actual versus budget. Now, we will have an advantage next year because this year we budgeted by month, which involves seasonality, so that we should be able to get a more crisply defined budget versus actual for each month. But for right now, based on the experience we've had, we look at 10 or 11 months worth. We take 10 or 11 months out of 12 for the budget, and we look at those comparisons. Separately, I have the tax collector focus in on the cash collections on taxes because that's such a big driver. I get a report every week that shows from early March through current. So I have it through May right now. And we compare this year versus last year. The current collections for this period, so it's March, April, May, are running about 15% below last year. I'm not terribly concerned because this is a slow time for tax collections. We send out our bills July 1 and January 1. So the big collections are 4 to 8 weeks after that. But for this period, we're monitoring it, and we've already collected over 99% of our budgeted revenues. So I'm not too concerned. The biggest issues are grants from the state being conservative. I like to see it before I count it because so many things can happen at the state level. And with COVID, I know they're under tremendous pressure, but I know they have a big commitment to support local governments. So I expect that money to come in, but there's a piece that we haven't gotten yet, but nothing greater than our 10 or 11 month total. We're fine right now. The other thing would be some fees, let's say through Parks and Recreation, where we may not have gotten all of the revenues that we might have budgeted. But having said that, we also have some expense savings because of closings. So again, net, I think we're kind of okay. So we're monitoring that every half month, and it's a question of, at a very big picture level, we'll have pluses and minuses. We have Board of Ed that we don't control, but we've been in touch with Tom Hamilton. And I think we're doing kind of okay. As Angela said, we do have contingency. We've used it. And remember last year, we came in with a very strong surplus. So we'll have to see how the numbers come in. But right now, we feel we're doing okay for where we are. Does that address the question? Are there any questions?
No, that's very good.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you.
All righty, so we went through salary. All right, so is there anything else?
And I just asked Troy one more thing. I just one more thing, and I just wanted to thank the mayor for his handling of the this George Floyd case. I thought the statement he made the other day was very powerful, and I think he's doing a great job as far as leadership goes. As we saw yesterday, I was at the rally, at the protest yesterday. The mayor was there, and Bob Duff was there. It was good to see. It was a very peaceful demonstration, the one on Connecticut Avenue. And I'm just happy of the way, proud to see that, Norwalk is stepping up, and the mayor is leading that. So just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Mr. Geller. I appreciate that. Thank you for being there. It was something that needed to happen, and I'm very proud of our police officers, men and women who showed compassion, who actually were there with one purpose, and that was to protect the demonstrators from vehicular traffic or any other things that they felt were needed. So they did a great job, and again, thank you for being there. And this Wednesday night, on my town hall meeting at 7 o'clock, I'll be having Senator Murphy, one of our local clergy, and other Brenda Penn Williams from the NAACP, and a couple of other leaders from the community that will be on talking about the things that we need to do going forward. I think it's time for us to stop reacting when one thing happens and then walk away from the meeting thinking we've done everything we can do. These dialogues, these communications need to be ongoing. We need to keep this on the front burner, and we need to talk about all the things that we can do to prevent these kinds of things from happening in the future. So again, thank you.
Okay, anything else? A motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll move.
Okay, it's been moved. I'm not going to vote on it. The meeting's adjourned.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Ed.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you all
Thanks,
very
Ed.
much.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Thank you.
Stay
Thank
safe.
you.